Now then, how you doing? Did you know that it's possible to buy every Elvis song released in the 1950s on a single and or an EP? It's an amazing statistic. It just shows how big, how popular Elvis was back in the 1950s. And when he was in the army in 1959, the Colonel and RCA did something just as audacious. They rounded up all the singles and EPs that had not been on albums and put them onto 2 compilation LPs. Those are for LP fans only, and A Date with Elvis, of course. Now, it just so happens that I have 6 of the 7 Japanese issues of A Date with Elvis. So I'm going to be showing you those today, talking about them, and just focusing a little bit on the way that the album's packaging changed, and the how the titles of the album changed as well. So the first one is this one here, and like the UK album, it was not released in a gatefold sleeve. It just comes in a single pocket sleeve with a calendar on the front, with a calendar on the back. Now, the pictures on the back, 2 of the pictures on the back, the ones with the yellow background, have been touched up. I think the idea was to try and make Elvis look a little bit more Japanese. But I'll put a close-up picture of that part of the cover on screen, because they made a real mess of it, and he doesn't look Japanese and he doesn't look American either. Now the front cover is slightly different to the American one, as you can see if you look at the pictures at the bottom here. They've used different pictures to the American one. And what I like most about the Japanese cover is this English at the top here. They've written "For Elvis's fan." So there's no plurals in Japanese, so they often get confused when to use S and when not to use S. So the album is, like all Elvis's albums until 1968, was on this black Victor label. So they didn't release it in a gatefold sleeve, but they did provide an insert with the album, and on one side of the insert you actually got all of the information that was in the original American gatefold sleeve. The radiogram, the picture of Elvis in uniform, and then the smaller photographs with the English text underneath. And on the opposite side you have the lyrics to the songs in English and the song titles in Japanese and English. And the quality of the cover, this is fairly typical of the 1950s Japanese covers. The stock is quite thin, and if it is laminated, it's barely laminated. It's difficult to describe. It's not as rough as an American cover, but it's not as smooth as a UK cover. So it may be laminated, but very thinly. So this album was released with an obi, and I'll put a picture up on the screen so you can see what it looks like. Sadly, I don't have the obi. In fact, this is one of only 2 Japanese 1950s albums that I can confirm came with an obi. There was this one and an album called Golden Records Volume 2, which is completely different to the American version of Golden Records Volume 2. But yeah, I think there were 10 Japanese albums in the 1950s, but I've only ever seen 2 with obis. In 1962, when electronically reprocessed stereo came out, all of Elvis's 1950s albums were reissued in Japan, in both mono and in electronically reprocessed stereo. This is a mono copy of A Date with Elvis from 1963. And there's the back cover with the lyrics on the back. Now the title of this album changed very slightly on this issue. The original album was basically called the same as in English, A Date with Elvis, but in Japanese phonetics, A Date with Elvis. With this one, they changed the title very slightly to Presley no Dato. So that means A Date with Presley, basically. So almost the same title, but just changed it to Presley. They did the same thing with the Christmas album. In Japanese, the Christmas album is called Presley's Christmas Album. Whereas we would often use Elvis's first name in the titles of albums, very often they would use Presley instead in Japanese. Now the stereo version of A Date with Elvis was delayed for some reason, and all the other ones came out in 62, 63, but A Date with Elvis didn't come out until 1965, and this is that album here, still on Victor. Now you can see that the cover looks more like the American original now. The pictures are the same as the US original. It's still not in a gatefold, like most Japanese albums of that time. At that time, the back cover contains the lyrics in English and a few notes in Japanese. Now, the title on this album is completely different. They changed it to The King of Rock. That's the Japanese title up there, Roku no Osama. Why they changed the title for the stereo version, I'm not sure. But that's what it became. In Japanese it was The King of Rock. Now in 1970 they reissued this album, and it was one of a series of 3. And if you look on the back cover there, right at the top of the cover, you can see it says Volume 3. Now the Japanese text beside it says Presley Rock History. So it's Presley Rock History, Volume 3. Now Volumes 1 and 2 were for LP fans only, and A Date with Elvis. Now the reason why I'm showing you this one first is because the Japanese title of this album is The King of Rock, which is the same title as the stereo copy of A Date with Elvis from 1965. So this one became The King of Rock. And even on the label, so by this time Elvis's records were on RCA. At the top of the label in English it actually reads The King of Rock. So I don't have for LP fans only in that series, but I do have A Date with Elvis. Now if you look at the top of the 1970 pressing of A Date with Elvis, you can see it says Volume 2 here. So that's Presley Rock History Volume 2. The title in Japanese is now called The Essence of Rock. So you've got Volume 3 was The King of Rock, Volume 2, that's this one here, is The Essence of Rock, and Volume 1, for LP fans only, was called The Birth of Rock, presumably because it has That's Alright on it. So when they brought out this album in 1970, they changed the cover completely, and they released it in this great looking cover here. And the picture on this is just it's wonderful. You can actually see Elvis's pimples on his face. And this, you can see this blue shirt looks really blue. And this is the shirt that What's-Her-Face bought him, isn't it? Natalie Wood, that's it, that's her name. And to make this one even more appealing, it's actually a white label promo, RCA white label promo. The first volume for LP fans only, which I said is called The Birth of Rock, I've actually got that one coming in the next few days with the Obi as well, so when I get the chance I'll show you that. So the next Date with Elvis came out in 1973, and this is that one here, and the back cover now looks like the 1965 American reissue. This is still in stereo. The 1970 pressing that I showed you, that was also in stereo. And this came out not long after the Aloha TV special aired, and they released 20 albums in a series, all of course on this orange RCA label. Now this series is particularly popular with people who like to buy Japanese LPs because they all came with a poster. And this is the poster which came with A Date with Elvis. Now each poster was different. They didn't have the same poster. There's 20 different posters. And you've got Elvis's name there at the bottom. It's got the RCA logo. And then over here it puts the catalogue number of the album. And also in some cases it tells you the photographer's name when the photographers were Japanese. So that looks like it's from the Aloha show. So I recently got quite a few albums in that series. And I'm going to do a separate video on those in the not too distant future. The title on this album went back to Date with Elvis, or in Japanese pronunciation, Deito with Elvis. And basically it's stayed that way ever since. The two pressings which followed this one also used the same title. The 1977 reissue was the next one, and the cover was basically the same as the one I just showed you from 1973, and the Obi just changed to a kind of an orangey yellow cover. I don't have that one, but as I say, it doesn't really differ much from the 73 pressing, and it's still in stereo. And the last one I've got to show you is from 1992. This one here. And at long last it was available again in mono. This is part of a series, the 15th anniversary series. Elvis's first 9 albums, the 50s albums plus Elvis is Back. And this one also has, finally, its Japanese pressing with the original gatefold. Now, I have shown you this before, so I don't want to end on an album which I've already shown you. So I'll end by showing you something that I haven't shown you before. Okay, this is an original UK pressing of A Date with Elvis. Now, like the Japanese album, it did not come with the gatefold cover. It just came with a calendar on the back. In fact, you don't even get any pictures on the back there. But this is really, really hard to find in this condition. You can see the cover looks as white as the day it was released. And it's got the release date of May '59 in the bottom there on the cover. I actually found this in Japan, believe it or not. And there's the original inner sleeve. Again, it just looks like it's just come straight out of the factory. And there's the original LP. I think I can count literally 1 or 2 spindle marks on the labels, and there's just not a mark on the record anywhere. You might ask, why do I keep such a nice LP in a paper inner sleeve? Well, I don't like plastic inner sleeves, and maybe I'll get into that another day on another video. Well, I hope you've enjoyed those dates with Elvis. If I were to recommend one Japanese pressing, if you just wanted to get one copy from Japan, then I'd probably recommend this one. The sound is really good, it's back in mono, and it has a really nice quality cover, and it's in the gatefold cover just like it was meant to be. Okay, that's it for today. Thanks for watching. Take care.